Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Looks like it might be rather dicey today. And so perhaps we may have to bring the subject matter up next week. We've got some really riotous winds out here in the Enchanted Forest. But I invite you all back into the chat room. Hopefully you're still listening at this moment, talking about nightmares. Next week on Wednesday, we'll continue on with this particular subject matter, but talking about nightmares as hints perhaps that something within us needs to be looked at, maybe reconsidered. Sometimes our psyche comes to visit us when we are sleeping, when we're resting, when we're not busy with the outer world things. The inner world then can take over. It can take over. All right. So this morning, in talking about dreams, a lot of times parents will ask me about night terrors and their children. How does it affect their children? The night terrors, the nightmares, where do they come from? Well, sometimes there are visitations during our dream time in which we are visited by those from the other realms who slip into our dreams, into our dream space. I often think of our dream space as something of like an auric bubble that's going on while we are resting. And just like any other energetic space, there are those from the physical world and the non-physical world that can step into our dream space, into our auric space. And sometimes there are those with good intentions that step in. Sometimes we'll be visited by those we love who have crossed over and receive a wonderful, warm message for them. The other evening, I was having quite a lively dream time. And in the dream time, I heard somebody actually outside of my dream time. So outside of my physical body, in the room with me, a beautiful voice. It was a beautiful woman's voice. And I heard her say very clearly, very loudly, "Hello, hello." And it was so loud and such a beautiful voice that I woke up out of my dream and I heard it again. "Hello." And so I sat with that for a bit. I sat with that for a time. Thought about who it might be. Who it could possibly be. And, anytime that we're analyzing our dreams, anytime that we're analyzing our experiences, those coincidences, those synchronicities in our life, sitting with it for a moment, asking the question, who was that? Who was that? And for myself, I've learned to pay attention to my intuition. And so when I asked the question, who was that speaking to me? And I saw a woman's face, and I knew instinctively who it was. And I said, "Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for letting me know that you're here, that you're there, that you're well." Nightmares and night terrors sometimes are misunderstood messages, because the experience that I just described for some people would be a night terror to hear the voice. Not only within the dream, but to wake up and to hear the voice outside of our physical body. For some people, that would be a night terror. That would be a nightmare. And so whether it's something that I may not interpret as fiendish, others might, I often say just stop for a moment and think about it. Think about it, feel it, contemplate it, ask for clarity. Hi, Janet. I know we keep cutting out this morning. Thank you for coming back into the chat room. It's very windy out here in the Enchanted Forest. And Todd is working in his office, and he has zero internet, which is not good when you work remotely from home. So he's trying to work from his phone as well, as am I. So nightmares sometimes are confused messages. Like the woman speaking to me in my dreams the other night and calling to me from outside of my body as well. She was clearly well within my bedroom as she was calling to me. For me, that was a blessing, but for many, that might be considered a trauma. Janet saying, maybe it's a daytime nightmare. That could very well be. I still have dreams, believe it or not, from being in high school and not remembering the combination to my locker. That was always a concern for me in school. You know, when you finally get to that age, middle school, high school, and you have a locker with a lock, my biggest fear was not being able to remember the combination for my locker lock. And sometimes I still have that dream, not being able to open something up, not being able to unlock something. And so when I still have that dream, even today, I sit with it. What is it that I'm not able to unlock? What am I frustrated about? What am I frustrated about? Taking a look at it from an adult perspective, you know, sometimes we can have dreams that we've had since we were children, and we forget to look at it as an adult rather than as a child. If you're somebody who's having a continual nightmare and you've had it since you were 5, 6, 7 years old, it's time to look at it from an adult's perspective. What was your young self receiving as a message from spirit, from its soul, from your soul? There's a whole lot that happens in the dream time. We're visited not only by specters of our own psyche, things that we need to pay attention to, we're not paying attention to during our waking hours, that is when the body is physically awake, but we're also visited by others. I've always felt that it's really, really a good thing to prepare ourselves for the dream time. Just as we prepare ourselves in the morning for going out and having our day, going to work, seeing clients at home, going shopping, going visiting, whatever it happens to be, we prepare ourselves. And hopefully not only are we putting on clothing, but we're also putting on our spiritual clothing. So when I put my nightgown on at night, I'm also making sure that I put on my celestial nightgown, my nocturnal nightgown, which is I invite the angels, the guardian angels of my dream time to be present. I invite my guides, my allies, and my most ancient and illuminated ancestors to be present with me while I am asleep. In this way, I have guardians that are with me. I have guides that are with me, because if I'm going to go into the dream time and I want to visit someplace purposefully in the dreamscape, I have guides going with me. I'm not just going out there astral traveling willy-nilly, right? I'm prepared. Those of you that have my book, A Year of Mystic Angels, and also the Book of Prayers and Incantations, you know that I include information about bringing the angels in, those beings of light beings, the shining ones, to be present when we are going to sleep at night. We also can, you know, by many names we call them. The guardians of the north, the east, the south, and the west, the betwixt and between, the guardians of above and below, to safely guide us into our dream time, our nap time, our daydream time. A lot of young people who are very psychic sensitive, hey, Katie. Yeah, or failing classes. Yes, it's amazing how those repetitive dreams can continue on into our adulthood. Absolutely. So what are we afraid of failing at? Why are we still afraid of looking like a failure when we have those dreams as adults? Our young mind is also very, very wise. Our young soul is ancient. And so sometimes young people who are already sensitive seers in these very old and ancient soul selves are having very deep dreams. Very deep dreams. Sometimes they're dreaming about past lives. And maybe they're not even really dreaming about them. Perhaps they're living them on the time continuum. Perhaps they're stepping into past lives. And this is why, again, it's so important before we go to sleep, before our children go to sleep, that we help them enter into the dream state in a good way. In my new book, A Book of Enchantments with the Mystic Angels of Light. Oh, I love that. I share one of the prayers from the Book of Prayers on page 111. That number 111 is very, very potent. It's about new beginnings. That number 111, new beginnings. So on page 111, for those of you that will be receiving your pre-ordered book this week, and those of you that have ordered it online, the prayer for restorative sleep. One of the things that nightmares and night terrors does is that it can rob us of the sleep that our body needs. Our body needs to be nourished by rest. And sometimes we don't get that. And some people go decades without really having decent rest because they don't really know what's going on in their dream time that's keeping them awake and feeling as though they never went to sleep to begin with. Well, life continues to happen even when the body is at rest. Spiritual life, soul life, past lives, future lives. All of that going on. Visiting the etheric mystery schools where we're learning. Often this is exactly what's going on, but our human mind, the rational mind, says this doesn't feel right to me, therefore it must be bad. This is a new experience. I can't quite comprehend it, so it must be malevolent. This is why contemplation is always a good thing after having a dream that we find disturbing. Right? To sit with it for a minute. To be present with it. If it is a disturbing dream, then we probably need to double up on our efforts in preparing ourselves for the dream time. In my bedroom, I have a beautiful piece of tiger eye iron, and it's beautiful. But I have, in my bedroom above my bed, a magnificent dream catcher that my brother Guy made for me many years ago, and it hangs above my bed. And it was blessed and prepared in sacred manner so that it would help to catch the dreams that aren't necessary for me to have, those that are coming to me from places that might be harmful. My room, our room, Todd and I, our bedroom is very well ensconced in sacred objects to keep the nighttime holy, to keep it sacred, which really has me doubling up on my efforts trying to understand what it is and why it is that somebody has entered into my dream time. Sometimes malfeasance is allowed into the dream time so that we can be aware. We can be awake and aware. Why did I dream about that person last night? I set up my guards, right? I prepared myself well for sleep. I didn't watch a horror movie, and I didn't drink a bunch of alcohol while I was watching that horror movie, whatever it happens to be. But we know that we've properly put ourselves in a place for sleep, and yet it happens. Sometimes a night terror or a nightmare is a warning so that we can be awake. We can be aware. Sometimes we receive those same signs and signals when our body is awake. And again, when we remember a dream in the morning, it's important for us to think about it and sometimes to act upon it. If we have a dream about a particular person, it may not be that particular person that's that is acting in a harmful way, and we are being warned about it. Sometimes that person in the dream time is a archetype of something else or someone else, right, that may have us on their mind or have us in the crosshairs. And there are things that we can do about that. When I have a nightmare such as that, and in my nightmare somebody is attacking me, somebody's running after me and grabbing at me, and I'm wrestling with them, or whatever it happens to be, in the morning when I wake up and I consider what it is that was presented to me, I can either be subject, willy-nilly to whatever's going on, or I can be proactive. Guardians of the north, of the east, of the south, and the west. Mikael, Uriel, Gavriel, Raphael, Metatron, Raguel. Thank you for protecting me from all harm, all malfeasance, all things that may wish to do me harm, and those that I love harm. Thank you for your protection and your guidance. To walk in this world and to think that the physical reality is all that there is to me, well, it's just crazy. It's ignorant. Some people wish to be blissfully ignorant, but when we're walking the world as a seer or a sensitive, a modern day mystic, we need to understand that the mystery also includes those things and those people, those situations, those beings that may wish to test us. We call it integrity testing. I call it integrity testing. How are we going to respond? How are we going to walk? Are we employing what we know? Are we employing what we've learned? Or are we just going to be blissfully unaware and used as a punching bag, so that we don't have to be responsible for who we are or acknowledge who we are and the walk that we are walking as modern day mystics, as parents and aunties and grandparents and uncles of children who are very young seers and sensitives. When a child is very young, their soul may be ancient, but in their youth, perhaps they're unable to protect themselves from the unseen. And so we, as the elders in their lives, have an opportunity to help them with that. The soul minding webinars and the soul minding classes that I'm going to be teaching in 2020 are geared toward this exact thing, particularly part 1. The webinar series and the physical class series. How do we as elders, as elder mystics, as elder seers, how do we help those souls? How do we help mind them when they are so young? What about the ones that come in already terrified and trembling? What was the experience that they had between their spiritual home and getting here in their physical? There's also a labor and delivery team that we can utilize when a child is being born and after the child is born, right? How do we help to mind those souls? How do we help to mind the souls of those that are having nightmares and night terrors? I'm writing a new book about it as well for those interested in the work. I believe that hospice work has expanded into a field that most hospice workers are not comfortable entering, even though many know about it. And so I've begun a program of certification and training into the extras about the soul. Minding the body is a great good thing that hospice workers help us with. But what about minding the soul? Minding the dream time. The prayer for restorative sleep on page 111. Nocturnal guardians, angels of spiritual restoration and of deep healing sleep, thank you for helping me to calm my unsettled mind and bring harmony to my troubled spirit. Thank you for relieving me of physical discomfort and the concerns of my heart. Angels of the dream world, deliver me to the source of Creator's calm. Lift me into the loving arms of the divine mother of all. Rock me in the cradle of creation's vast cosmic sea, and bring me to its center of silent peace. Guide me, guard me, and sing me into a deep, restorative sleep. And so it is. Amen. That's on page 111 of A Book of Enchantments, Restorative Sleep. There are evening prayers, prayers for entering into the dream world, also included in this book. You can get it at schoolofsacredstudies.com, where you can also see my lineup for soul minding, both the webinar series and the series here at the physical school. The dream time is confusing for a lot of people. It's not confusing for shamans, for medicine people, for shavans, such as Amantha Murphy. It wasn't confusing for our wise elders, our ancient relatives, those that were illuminated. I believe that each and every family has within it and has always had within it the family mystic. I believe in modern day, we see that extrapolated into Catholic families giving over at least one person from the family to become the family nun or the family priest, right? Well, this son is going to go into the priesthood. This daughter is going to become a nun and live in a convent, etc. I believe that prior to that, every family just understood that within the family structure, there was one person, maybe more, who was the healer, who was the herbalist, who was the seer, the mystic. We know that it's true in the ancestry of the Celts, of the Norse, and of course in indigenous peoples all over Grandmother Earth, those that still remember and those that are remembering that there were those within the family who were present on the earth plane to help mind the souls, to help care for and nurture the souls of those in the family, of the clan, of the village, of the community. Within the community of my native relatives, there are those medicine people that were recognized as such the moment they were born, and they were kept from others and raised exclusively in a way that would train them up to be exactly that, people who walk the path of spirit. And again, this is why in the Catholic tradition, oftentimes young girls were given up as early as 10, 11, 12 years old to the convent. Some were recognized and some were just given over because, frankly, there were too many kids. And then there were those who wanted to become a nun or to become a priest. In many traditions, there are priests in other traditions. Some young people know straight away that their role is to mind souls, to walk into the dream time with them. The dream time can also be dreamed consciously. When we go into that time when our body is resting, we can consciously set up a place and a space for our soul to walk into a terror, into a situation that needs solving. There are many times, many of my clients, particularly my clients that come from, I call them still ancient civilizations, from the Middle East, from Asia, will contact me to go into the dream time. In other words, to go into the nocturnal or to go into the etheric worlds. Sometimes the etheric worlds come to us as dreams, and sometimes we go into the etheric worlds, also known as dreams, the dream world. They're all real worlds. It's how do we label them? It's how do we label them? And I purposefully, consciously walk into the dream world to see what's going on with somebody's spiritual body or physical body, mental body, emotional body, and come back out. This is something that's been done forever on this earth plane. It has long been forgotten. It is now being remembered. I believe, as most of you know, it has much to do with Ancestry.com, 23andMe, and the likes. People delving into their ancestry, into their ancestors. And there are ways to delve into the ancestors in a good way, and ways to delve into it in a precarious way, which is why in 2020 at the School of Sacred Studies, we will be exploring ancestral wisdom and healing. Me, David Sturkin, Nicole Fix, Linda Griezak, we have formed a team. Because the old teachings are coming back, they're rising again. Our ancestors knew that the time would come for them to be unearthed, for them to be practiced and practical upon the earth plane. And, there are many ways we can help others as they're exploring their own mystical self, their soul self. I believe the veil has gotten thinner and is going to continue to remain very thin on the earth plane. In other words, that spirit has become closer to us. That the walls, the octaves, the energies between us have really lifted. The veil has lifted. Leaving a glass of water next to our bed is a good way of absorbing extra psychic activity for the nighttime. Being careful to send it down the toilet in the morning and not to drink it or to give it to the dog or the cat or put it in our plants is a good thing. Having a beautiful piece of black obsidian or snowflake obsidian in our bedroom, a dream catcher, appropriately made, not just one you bought at a gas station on the interstate, but one that was made in a sacred manner, one that you've made, right? You can bless that water next to your bed. Thank you for absorbing all of the excess energies coming to me while my body is asleep. Thank you, angels of light and enchantments, right? For imbuing this water with your sacred light in order to absorb excess energies, harmful energies that may appear during my dream time. Right? It's about taking charge. It's about taking charge of our own spiritual wellness, of our own dream time wellness, and helping those that need a help. Janet is saying, that's amazing. Thanks. I'm really excited about the soul minding work. It's very much doula work or midwife work. And there are those of us, we know who we are. We know who we are. And we don't have to shout it from the rooftops, but we can. Many of us are doing the work anyway. We're the ones who receive the phone call, so-and-so just went to the hospital. Can you pray for them? They're in a coma. They're in and they're out. Well, where are they when they're in and they're out? Where are they when they're in a coma? Where is grandma or grandpa when they're dealing with Alzheimer's? And sometimes they're in their body, sometimes they're not in their body. Where are they when they're not in their body? And how can we help with that? What about the baby that's born prematurely? And perhaps all of their soul parts are not yet fully present because of the premature birth. How can we help with that? Part of them is still in the dream, in the ancestral dream, and part of them is in the earthly dream. How do we assist with that? How do we assist the young child that's making their first communion, their bar mitzvah, going into the convent, becoming a priest, having a crisis of faith? How do we help that soul part of them in this part of the dream, the physical dream, the waking dream? There are many nightmares, many terrors that happen both in the waking dream and in the nocturnal dream. It's about being smart about it, preparing ourselves for the dream, utilizing the information that we have received. And yes, we can have dreams that are very much like the horror movie that we watched before we went to sleep. Sometimes it's our own psyche saying, stop watching those movies. They are not good for you. Don't do that. Sometimes we eat foods before we sleep that disturb our sleep, and so the message is what? Don't eat that before you go to sleep. Don't drink that. Don't smoke that. Don't take that before you go to sleep. Sometimes it's just that mundane. But I like horror movies. I like reading Stephen King novels. I don't like either of those, but many people do. Well, maybe your dream time is saying, well, perhaps you should read it during a different time of the day and not just before you go to sleep. Right? So sometimes being a mystic means we have to be practical in our mysticism. We have to pay attention to the practical part of being human. And if we are particularly empathic or sensitive, considering the fact that, well, maybe before we sleep, on a full moon or a new moon, or the new moon rising in our astrological sign,